happy Friday. I was just sitting here thinking I need to do a video and explain to people my story and what happened about my job. So I was in sports radio. I landed my dream job and nobody understands why I gave it up. So I want to clarify that for some people because I don't want them thinking that, they have to give up sports or anything. For me, I have very, very strong convictions. So what happened to me was I was obsessed. I was living at the ballpark towards the end of my marriage. I guess the last 5 years, probably almost every home game. And you're talking about probably close to 300 games, 400 games. I mean, I never missed a game. We actually went out of town and traveled and watched the team play in Tampa and Minnesota, and we went other places. I was always traveling to see the team play. I loved baseball. I was obsessed. I had a red BMW with our girl plates on the back, and I was driving my dream car, and I was known as Rangers Girl, and I had been doing some blogging and writing, and some of it got published and some didn't, and I was sitting front row on the first base side for many, many years. And so I'm trying to think what happened. So I guess that was around 2010. And I had I'd left my marriage in 2011. I ended up with a guy that sat on the front row on the third base side that I met. And I was just friends with. I ended up with him, and we were just always at the ballpark. There were 12 consecutive home games. I mean, we would be there forever, so we never missed a game. And I started my own clothing line. This is what's really great. I started my own clothing line. I was doing a dress line and mix and match pieces for mom and daughters, and I had a vision for what I wanted to do, and I had a business plan, and I had started designing dresses, and I couldn't get licensing, so I set out to just sell dresses just for a year to see how they did. So I started the whole t-shirt dress thing, and I sold a lot of dresses that season, and I just sold them for what my cost was pretty much to see how they would do, to put it in the business plan, and they took off. And people would chase me down and go, "Where did you get that? Where did you get that?" So my dress line was very, very unique. I was trying to make women come out of t-shirts and just feel beautiful when they were at the ballpark. So I was just in a different place mentally than I am now. And I ended up with the guy I ended up with I look at it now as probably a rebound, and it was just a bad decision on my part because I wasn't walking. I left my marriage for a lot of reasons, but I wanted to walk with the Lord, and I knew that my first love was God, and I knew that I needed to get back to the place I used to be before my marriage, or in the beginning of my marriage when I met him. And he said he was a Christian, but there was no fruit there. And as the more money he got, the worse more greedy he got, and we both had gone through it. I'd had a big house, and I've had everything I could dream of, but I was known as Rangers Girl. I knew everybody at the ballpark. I loved the ballpark. Started realizing I was making the ballpark my church and baseball my God. And that's where things went really wrong, was because for me, it was just an obsession. I lived, ate and breathed baseball 24/7. I would, like I said, I was writing, I was getting articles published, and it just became an obsession with mine. So during that time I was with this guy, I found out he was agnostic. I didn't know what agnostic was. And I had just started watching Joel Osteen. I know you guys are going to kill me, but I just started watching him, and I was like, wow, he's pretty cool. I didn't know the things I know now, but I'd been a Christian my whole life pretty much, or since I was a little girl. But I was never fed spiritually, and I don't think I grew the way I needed to grow. I grew, I just kind of maxed out. So during the time that I was with this guy, we would go to church, and he would stare at the lighting, and he would be like, um, I'd be like, what did you think about the service? What did you think about the message? And he was like talking about the lighting, and I got more out of it than he did. And there was just something that was not right. His soul was just not right. Come to find out, he had come from the Catholic Church, and um, his mom was related to Obama, if that tells you anything. So I didn't know that, but she wanted to argue with me about politics, and I wouldn't do it. So there was just really nothing was ever. It was always just restlessness with him, and it was just a sick game to him to try to get the pretty girl, I guess. I don't know. I didn't think I was all that then at all, believe me. But I had my clothing line. During that time, I had 3 investors, very, very interested. So I was with him. I was living with him in sin. And I had 3 dreams. I was talking to Jesus. And I had 2 of them when I was with him and 1 without him. And I had spent all night long with Jesus. I don't know what we talked about, but I just remember him asking me if I trusted him. And I said, yes. And he said, you don't trust me. He said, you don't trust me. You say you trust me, but you don't trust me. And we laughed. I mean, I remember laughing a lot with him. And when I woke up, I was really, really disappointed that he was not there. And towards the end of the relationship, I heard God say, you need to get rid of him. And I said, but God, what about baseball? And he said, I'll give you more baseball than you've ever dreamed of. And I said, I didn't hear this right. I mean, I ignored it and ignored it and ignored it for a very long time. I was like, I'm not giving up baseball. And so I had a dream. This ex-boyfriend of mine was, going to the ballpark, and I just finally got to where I just didn't want to go anymore. And I just said, I just go without me. And there was just some trust issues there. It was just, he was a narcissist, and it was not a healthy place for me to be at all. And I remember I had a dream right before he left that I was being crucified, because he was always accusing me of things. And he was jealous of my ex-husband. There was so much stress there in that relationship that it just became just an unhealthy place for me to be. And so I actually, God told me to get rid of him, that he wasn't going to change. And that's where it became a hard thing for me to do. And I think I just pushed him out the door. I mean, I just picked and picked and picked until he left. And I was devastated. I was just devastated. I thought, how am I going to support myself? How am I going to take care of myself? I don't know how I'm going to do any of this stuff, and I can't afford to live on my own. I don't know what I'm going to do. And my marriage, just the last couple years, was just brutal. I mean, it just was really bad, and there was a lot of consequences for both of us to pay, and it was a lot of stress, and I needed to heal more than anything. So during that time, I got rid of him, and I kept my clothing line. And during those 2 years, I had 3 investors, potential investors, that loved my idea. They loved my business plan. They loved everything that I had to do. And they would work with me and meet with me and talk to me about options and going into, other people. A lot of these guys had a lot of connections in the textile industry over in China and stuff. So I would have had all the help I needed. But there was always an agenda with these men. And they always had, and I looked for a female investor. I couldn't find one. Everybody wanted so much of my company. I even had Mark Cuban's company, the Shark Tank, call me and wanted me to go on Shark Tank. They loved what I was doing, but they wanted me to have licensing. And if I would have got licensing, I wouldn't have needed their help. So that just defeated the whole purpose. Licensing was so expensive. So my goal was to branch out into other sports as well. And I had Emmitt Smith behind me. I had, a connection with Mike Madonna. I had all these things I was going to do with dress endorsements and all this stuff that I was going to do. And I felt like I had one guy tell me that he was in an open relationship and he would invest, but then he was like, I remember he said to me that I remember he said to me one day, he said, you're too pretty to be working. And I said, I need a career, and he's like, you just need to be a well-kept woman. And I said, no, I'm not. I don't work that way. And I just remember I shut the door that day, and I shut the door on every contact I had, and I gave up my company completely. And I thought when God said, I'll give you more baseball than you ever dreamt of, I thought he meant my company. Well, long story short, I'm guess after 2 years of fasting from the world, 2.5 years of fasting from the world, and losing 25 pounds and just being sick all the time and depressed and stressed. And I mean, I had reached a point where I was almost suicidal. I just did not want to live anymore. And just a deep, deep, dark place. And I would get up some days and all I would do is cry. And when I say I fasted from the world, I did not do anything. I went to the grocery store. I went to church. I actually didn't go to church until 2 years after my fast. I wouldn't even go to church. I would just get up in the morning. I would spend 3 hours a day watching Joyce Meyer. I know you guys are going to hate that, but I would spend 3 hours a day. It was the only place I knew how to start and the only place I knew how to study the Word of God. So I started studying her, doing her shows, like three hours a day of her shows. And, sorry, I'm sitting on Christmas decorations. There's no place to sit in here. But, watched her for 3 hours a day, and then I would spend time with my dog and God, and that's all I did for 2.5 years. I literally went to the grocery store. I would spend hours in prayer and reading my Bible and just studying the Word of God, and I got to know Him so much. I mean, it was like a time, literally, I lived in a cave, literally. I mean, like, I didn't come out. I hardly saw my family. I hardly did anything. I didn't have any friends. And the people at my apartments, I remember they would tell me, my friends, they would say, you know, when you first moved here, you put your head down and you walked down the hallway and you went to your car and you didn't talk to anybody. And they're like, when I left there, they were like, you're such a different person. You're so fun to be around and you're great. But it took 2.5 years of just starving myself from people and the world and removing myself. And so people ask me, have had people say, why do you think you're so special? Why do you think God would tell you this and not somebody else? I don't think I'm special. I think that I was willing. I think that I was obedient to the call, and I was willing to fast from the world and cut the world off and give it to God and just let Him use me and work in me. And I sat in that wilderness for 2.5 years, and I cried and I cried, and I went to some deep, dark, ugly places. And I was going to a Southwest Airlines interview for a job, and I made it to the final interview, and they loved me, except for the guy came in and he said, you don't have any experience, you have a gap in your resume, we can't hire you, I don't know how you made it this far. And I was so defeated. I came home from Chicago, I was sitting in the airport, and I got a phone call from the person who was my boss, and he said, we have been watching you on Twitter. I was on Twitter at the time. But we've been watching you on Twitter for 2 years, and or 2 or 3 years. I guess it was probably since, I think it was actually since 2011, probably when the World Series was going on. He said, you always stood your ground. And he said, you never wavered. And he said, we really like you. We want you to come to work for us. And I just, the thing that blows my mind even to this day is how it just all fell into place. Everything just lined up. Just everything just fell into place. And it was like, I had a guy from the Fan, which is a big station here in Dallas, tell me, he said, he saw me one day in the Mavericks locker room, and he said to me, he said, it's like you were born to do this. He said, this is just so easy to you. He said, where have you been? And I was so honored and flattered that he would even say that, because it just came easy for me. My son had played at a hockey school, a very high-level hockey school. We had been around famous athletes for years, and it just doesn't faze me. They're normal people, and so for me, it's just like talking to normal people. But getting rid of baseball was the hardest thing I've ever had to do. I remember when I moved in my apartment, I literally sat in bed for 3 weekends watching baseball and cried all weekend. I was miserable. And then I would turn on the TV and I would see him sitting at the ballpark with some whore, you know, like in my seat or whatever. So literally, I mean, he was taking strippers to the game, I was told. So it was just a bad, bad time for me. And I did a lot of cleaning house internally in my life. And that was when God started to show me the peace and the love and the joy that I could have by trusting him and by walking away from the world. And so I landed that job. I kept just crying out to God, how am I going to support myself? How am I going to take care of myself? What am I going to do? And that guy calls me, offers me a job. I get a phone call about a month, or not a month, but it was probably about a couple weeks later, and he says, hey, I've got an interview for you I need you to do, or a media day I need you to cover. I said, okay, no problem, you know, and he said, it's the Dallas Stars. I said, oh, great, I love hockey, I can handle this, you know, I know hockey, I know the game really well. I traveled with my son for 17 years, you know, and so I ended up, he calls me the day before, or I guess it was the next, so he called me the night before, and then he calls me that morning, and he says, oh, we made a mistake, it's with the Dallas Mavericks, and I don't like basketball. So I ended up I ended up covering the media day, and ended up knowing some of the reporters that were there. It just was, you know, I remember yelling at God in the car going, if this is not you, I just need you to take it all away, I need you to remove it, I don't want any part of it, you know. And it was like my dreams had come true. God had just poured favor and blessing on my life. And he reminded me that I told you I would give you all the baseball you ever dreamt of. I just did not know it was in sports radio. I remember the last thing I covered was I was in the Mavericks locker room opening night interviewing Chandler Parsons, who gave me a shout out across the room in front of all the ESPN reporters and stuff. And, you know, I met some great people, really great people, and I loved the job. It just came so natural for me. And I had to go, when you're starting in a radio station that's on the ground up, you're in the ground up, you're going to, from the beginning, you're going to have to go into bars and broadcast. And I just felt such conviction. I could not do it. I could not bring myself to do it. I'd been with an alcoholic who beat the crap out of me. I just could not go into a bar. And then the more I loved God and the more I knew God, the more I saw how people were worshiping sports. And when I say I fasted from the world, I turned off the television. I turned off anything that was worldly, including movies. If they weren't Christian movies, I didn't watch them. I didn't even turn on my TV. Once I decided to fast from the world, I shut it all off. I listened to Christian music. That was it. And Joyce Meyer. But once I fell in love with God, once I finally got to that place where I was so in love with him that I was in such a great place. For me to go in a bar and broadcast, especially with women that were half naked, I mean, young girls, I just could not do it. I just couldn't do it. And I felt strong convictions, especially, like, my passion was gone, and my passion is what makes me who I am. So I had lost all passion for that. My passion, I was writing some great articles. I was editing. I was actually editor over, I think there was like 18 writers. I was editing articles and posting articles, and I was doing all this stuff. I was reporting. I was doing a radio show. I mean, they were going to give me my own baseball show. I was going to get a baseball and hockey show, and I was so excited. And then it was like the passion just died out of me. I don't know. I can't explain it. But what's crazy is I went on my Facebook, and like 2 years before that, I had put that my dream job was in sports radio. And I wish I would have taken a screenshot of it before I deleted it. But it says I wanted to be in sports radio. God made my dreams come true because of my obedience to him. And, you know, that anguish that I felt, I asked God to see the world through his eyes. And I asked for the gift of prophecy. And, oh, he delivered in a big way. He over-delivered. So once my life was, you know, in the right place and with God, and I felt like I was healed completely and restored. I did not date. I did not go on dating sites. I didn't do any of that stuff. I was on a dating site for like a week, and I was like, I'm out. Somebody said that I became so heavenly minded, I'm no earthly good, and I think that's what happened to me. But I never heard that before, but apparently it makes sense. So I have just never gone back to the world. And I finally dove in. I got a job offer leasing apartments where I live, and I was told many times not to talk about God. So I did. I just talked about God every day. Just did not care. I'm like, I don't care. They don't pay me enough to not talk about God. So I finally gave my 2-week notice and I quit because of situations I don't want to talk about, but I don't want a job where I cannot talk about God and glorify and honor God. I don't want a job where I am put in that place and told that I can't be who I am and serve the God I serve and discuss him with people, because it was hard for me to take that job. During that time, God really showed me that he could use me in that way, and I brought a lot of compassion and kindness into that office, and that's what people told me anyways, and so then that's what they needed for sure. But he used me in that place, and he used a lot of people to touch my life as well. So but I want you guys to understand why I left sports radio. I left it because I want to serve God, and that is the most important thing in my life. And so I made a huge sacrifice to do that. And I thought it would be easy to find another job in Christian radio or doing prophecy or something that I love, because I studied eschatology. I'd love to do all these things, but apparently it's not as easy as I thought. So I am struggling, and I'm wondering how I'm going to support myself. But it's a day-to-day struggle, and it's a day of giving God so much trust and faith. I mean, I put everything I have into God, and it's not about me helping myself and me taking steps, because when I do, I take the wrong ones, and I'm not going to do it. If God doesn't lead the way, I'm not going. And I just couldn't see people in these bars worshiping sports the way that they should be worshiping God, and I was so convicted of it. And it was just a place I could not go. There was a lot of drinking that went on in the industry. I just don't support that. So that is what happened. So I've given up, my faith it's cost me a lot, and but I'd gladly give it up again. I would rather be under a bridge in a cardboard box loving Jesus, with reading my Bible and being left alone, than to be in a job or around people that tell me I cannot serve my God and I cannot speak the word of God to other people. It's just not worth it. So I've sacrificed my company. I've given up everything that I loved because I'll tell you this, when I was in the deepest, darkest place in my life, there was nobody there for me. My kids, my family, my friends. God was the only one that was there for me. And I've had more guys tell me, hey, I like so much about you, I just don't like this whole Jesus thing. And I'm like, oh no. I won't compromise who I am to be with somebody ever again. But more than anything, when God was the only person that was there for me, and the only person to pick me up when nobody else was, and he was faithful and he was consistent, and he was everything to me, and he carried me when I couldn't walk. Why would I give up what I have with him for a man? No, it's not worth it. So I refuse to let a man steal my crown. It's not going to happen. So I've been asked a couple of times this week, and I just felt like I should share my story, and hope that gives you guys some encouragement if any of you guys are going through something similar. So being a disciple of Christ comes with a huge responsibility, but it's one I'm willing to take. And so I'll take it, and I'll do it all over again any day. Okay?